All right, Alex Agahzadeh. Thanks so much for joining us on the Personal Success Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. I love your style and I love your methodology of talking to people who have maybe something to say or maybe try to be helpful. So I'm looking forward to this and I'll give you the baton to direct us through.
Well, thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you, and I think the audience is soon to find out why. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, those are the members of the audience that aren't familiar, who is Alex and what does he care about?
So interestingly enough, I came to US when I was 16. And during that time, when I came to US, I didn't know English. My family came as a family of refugees. And then the first thing I faced was survival and how to survive. And that led to certain wiring and programming for me, which is like kind of subconsciously happens. And just, I got into a flow of just executing, meaning whatever came my way, I didn't really think about what needs to happen was just like this step. I need to take this step. I need to take this step. I need to take the next one, the next one, and became this perpetual cycle of steps coming in front of me, executing and getting to the next milestone. And it continued for a long time. And at some point I realized I'm just doing things for the sake of just a milestone. And at a moment, it became very unfun to do it for me. And it became this sense of, I know I'm going to get to that milestone. And there was a build up rush to get to the milestone. And as soon as I got to the milestone, then it was like complete dissipation of any sort of joy out of, okay, we reached this one. Like, what are we going to do? And then as soon as I got there was a moment of relief and then going for the next one. And before I getting to the milestone, I already had in my mind, okay, what's the next one? So there was never a celebration of any moment of achievement because to me, that was already expected. And just like survival mechanism, you see it quite a bit in many people, especially if, I don't know, entrepreneurs, like people who have done things in their lives. I don't know, face adversity and overcome adversity. It builds this like mechanism in you that you just going for the next one because you're bracing, continuous bracing. Your amygdala is on fire continuously. You're scanning for issues. And then constantly internally, you're expecting yourself to perform under pressure. And obviously develop a specific characteristic that you can see it in many people who are, I don't know, like you could see it in boardrooms. That a couple of surgeons I know that's prevalent between them. People in high level executives, they deal with this issue. It's like kind of a very quiet pain that these people are facing. And you see it in social media or other people talking about it as continuous push to do more. But this is specific group of people, even though the weirdest thing is they have done so much, right? And they have this absolute self-doubt. If I stop right now, I'm not going to mean anything. And it's all internal. So you can't stop. There's no reason for you to stop. But the pain comes from the fact that you continuously keep going, keep pushing, because that's all you know.
Yeah, see, I feel like you sort of undersold, this that you talk about performance. You're like, I needed performance to survive. And so it was just one task after another. So when I say like performance, it's just you've got to perform this or take this action to move on. And it seems like, that took you pretty high. That took you pretty far in life. You were a very successful lawyer, right? Can you tell us a little
Yes.
bit about your career there?
This is funny. So, anyways, I went to UCLA, graduated, and I always had this sense of I want to do business. So I got into like the business side. We developed a business which is still going. Was in fashion business, and it's like a large fashion company that my partner at a time that we built it continued on. And then, but I had this sense of internally, I'm like, I just need mental gymnastic for whatever reason. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I went to law school and already at that point have done something that a lot of people around me thought, okay, like this is great. Why don't you just continue? So I went to law school, came out of law school. I didn't know what the world, so in law, there's a world of what is called big law, which is global law firms. And they're kind of distinct from the other, let's say, mid-size or smaller law firms. And you would notice if you're in that industry. So I didn't know the difference. I didn't have anyone who was like, I don't know, high level lawyer or anyone who told me. Like, actually, I found that one of my best friends in law school told me is like, there's this thing called OCI, which is on campus interviews that the large global law firms do. So I keep hearing about it. So I asked my friend, it's like, what's the story? It's like, you have to understand this. This is one of the most important part for you to understand, because you want to get a job with one of these large law firms, because usually the concept was they pay you the most. I'm like, okay, so that became a task. I did what I needed to do and ended up getting a job with in an area that I was interested. Well, probably it was it was in commercial real estate, specifically in hospitality. I got into a group which was probably top two in the country. And I don't even, and sometimes what I've seen in my life, as I just focus on the step in front of me without thinking about anything else, some like opportunities come that I wasn't expecting, and the doors open, which is very interesting because I've seen a lot of people focusing on their plan and they're just focused with blinders. This is how I need to go. In my case, it's always been like, okay, we need to adapt and overcome as things happen. And through that process, still to me a mystery, I ended up getting a job at probably was my top choice. This was in Los Angeles. I worked with them. Then one of the partners left to develop similar practices, another large global law firm. So I went with him to the other large global law firm. And then in the midst of this, I came across, I work with someone because we have offices all over the globe, and in US with someone in Texas. He's still one of my highly respected mentors. And after working with him, I'm like, I had this gut feeling, I just need to go to Dallas. So I left LA while everybody was telling me you're crazy, because if you're in Los Angeles or New York, especially this was at the time that was like first Trump election. So people were very sensitive to the idea of like, especially if you were on the coast, like, it was like, you're crazy going there. Why are you going? So I'm like, I just have this feeling I need to go. And I went, and it was the greatest ride I had. My mentor's name is John.
Alex,
And
I want to stop you right there because so you had this mentor from Dallas that you were
yes,
just like, I need to go here. It's just a feeling that I have to be sort of near this mentor, right? And you
yeah.
just trusted that and just went.
Yeah, I just went, and believe it or not, people from my office in LA didn't want me to go, even though they were saying it's okay. So I had to figure it out. I talked to John, and he was encouraging. He was just a young partner, and he had his own. So there's a lot of, in a big global law firm, there's a lot of, let's call it, politics happen. And so he was in a super secure position, but I just felt like, okay, this is it. And he was telling me, he's like, make sure if you come, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm like, it's fine, because it's always been, you just go figure it out. Anyways, I got there. We had a small practice, but through a few years, we built a large practice, and our practice became ranked in chambers in Texas. And that's like in the law firm world, that's probably the gold standard that you want to go for. And I remember when I was trying to get into law school, like one of the parts was like, there's this test called LSAT, and it has reading comprehension. And everyone's like, you need to read Wall Street Journal because that reading level is higher. So it prepares you for um, reading comp section. So I remember first time reading it, I'm like, my English wasn't that great. So I was like reading it. I'm like, I get some of this stuff. I didn't get all of it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the point of this is like after a few years, when I start practicing, especially in Dallas, we start doing large deals. Like the funniest thing was, and I have subscription to Wall Street Journal, and our deals will start coming on Wall Street Journal. So like as someone who struggled reading Wall Street Journal, then like seeing monthly, probably we had a one or two deals like show up on Wall Street Journal as the deals we did. And so it was like a weird feeling, because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so this is that sense of, okay, another milestone. So I went from the place of not be able to read the journal to the place that like my work and my team's work, we all working on fundamental deals that show up. These are multi-billion dollar, multinational transnational deals. So they show up in the journal that I was told to read to get into law school.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was very interesting to me. But believe it or not, same as any other milestone, I just swept it under the rug. It's like, okay, this is like how it is. You just go for the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. It does strike me. And maybe when I get to talk to a lot of people like yourself who sort of have this, they're drawn to successful pursuits and they've had a lot of success. And I think one thing that I hear in your story is that there's a tremendous amount of self-trust. There's something that you just trusted yourself. And now I guess we haven't got to the part of the story where sort of it didn't manifest in the way that you had wished or whatnot, but I sense that right now. Where does that, first of all, am I right in seeing that? And where does that come from for you?
That's an interesting observation. So one thing is people who know me know this, and I say it sometimes. I say this as, for the most part, I live a completely uncalculated life. And how I can describe that is there is some sort of a plan maybe as a where I'm aiming to go, but that's just like a contour and outline like in the background. And then it's just absolute focus on the step in front. Meaning, because from my perspective, and I don't know how this has happened, but from my perspective, outside of what's in front of you right now, anything else you're thinking about or anything else that comes into your awareness is actually detracting from you seeing the full picture of what you need to do. And it's very interesting because like I would say, I don't know if we call it confidence or whatever word we want to use, but from my perspective, it's always been, and part of it is because I've done stuff and I have faced adversities and I've seen how it is. Like first you have the doubt, you don't know how it's going to go. And sometimes you don't take action, sometimes you do. And I've seen it through iteration and I talk about this in the book, which is a lot of people face something. And the first thing is this feeling of fear of what if I lose my place in the world? What if things are not going to go the way I want them to go? And what I have seen, I guess like post facto observation of myself of how I deal with this thing is self-doubt and fear, especially is usually fear for most people, at least when I talk to people. And it's fear of losing what you have. And the interesting thing to me is like, I say this to my teammates, it's like anything known, any known future is the past. So if you're trying to protect something that is known to you right now, which is providing you with the, let's call it a comfort zone, at the edge of your comfort zone, because it's known, and how your nervous system approaches it is it wants you to be protected. So your subconscious doesn't really care about your definition of success, whatever that is. It could be, I want to make financially be whatever way, or have this thing, or I don't know, be the greatest dad, or whatever it is. Your subconscious does not care. What it cares about is your survival. And so the best metrics for it, which is, let's say, a heuristic approach, is it wants you to be in the known, quote unquote known, meaning something that you have done before, something we have seen, and it wires you that way. So when you face something new, meaning something that you haven't done, it's an unbeaten path for you. First thing that happens is like this feeling in your stomach that is like driven by your subconscious, which is, okay, I'm feeling this weird thing because I don't know where it's going. And then you hear this concept of resistance. That's what it is. Your subconscious telling you, this is a new space. More than likely, there are dangers because that's how it's trained. So therefore, it's better to not go. And this is your subconscious making the choice for you. A lot of people, I would say 99% of people that I come across, sure, you talk about choice, they don't understand, or I would say from my perspective, they don't really have a great grasp on what it means to make choices. Because most of the time, it's their subconscious patterns that make the choice for them. Like when you see something new, your subconscious create that sense of flutter in your stomach, your blood pressure rises, you feel the heat, and you're like, then you justify, after you don't take the action, you justify for yourself post facto that this is why I didn't do this. And you come up with reasoning, but that's like a post facto reasoning. And a lot of people, I call it justification rather than choice.
Yeah.
So it's like sitting in a car with a plastic steering wheel driving next to your dad. And as your dad turned the car, you turn your steering wheel and thinking you're actually turning the car. That's, I would say 90+% of people, that's how they go through life because they don't understand they're not making real choices. So when it gets for me, I need to have the awareness that it is happening. It's not like I'm 100% of the time I'm doing this, but like more and more you do it, you develop the awareness to be aware your subconscious is hijacking you. So when I have that feeling and I have that flutter in my stomach, and I'm like, as soon as I feel it, that is like, man, like if this goes wrong, like it's going to be a disaster. So what I tell myself, this is a reframing mindset, is like, what I tell myself is treat fear as a signal. That's all it is. It's a
Yeah.
signal and a question. The question is, are you ready for this? It's not stop here. It's just you're about to go something to do something new, and your subconscious will try to stop you because that's what survival is, staying where you know. But if you want to have any sort of adventure in life, and I would rather use the word adventure than success or achievement, because to me, the journey of going through the adventure has been more meaningful than getting the result. Because when I get the result, it's just empty after a while. So it's just more of like going through that adventure. So all it is a question asking you, are you ready for this? And if you neurologically look at it, fear and excitement have the same exact symptoms, right? So it's just a reframing of, am I ready for this? And then telling myself, like, how can I be excited about this? Because I need the excitement of a new adventure, because any known future to me is the past. So just getting myself ready for an adventure. And because I've done many of these adventures, and I can tell you a lot of them have failed. So to me, it's like, okay, we're going to go on the adventure because it's new. More than likely, we're going to learn a lot because we are going outside of the parameter of what is known to me.
Mhm.
And in that process, there's going to be growth, there's going to be pain, and there's going to be disappointment, but they're all built in. And it's like when you watch a movie, right? A hero story is watchable if it does have trial and tribulations. Otherwise, nobody wants to watch it. Like nobody wants to watch continuous series of like, this guy just came, slay the dragon, then slay the next dragon, slay the next. I never had to go through any doubts, anything. Like just, it's like humanity, life and humanity are just like hand in hand. So you have to realize like the meaning of being alive is being alive. It's like, I say this to my teammate. I'm like, for me to sit here as a human and for you to be there as a human is a 1 in 100 billion chances. You could be the rock, right?
Yeah.
1 in 100 billion chances. What are you going to do with that? You already won the lottery of life. What's next? Are you just going to sit here? Are you going to be like worrying about losing this? What does that mean? Like, what is this thing that you're protecting? And I would say you mentioned as like, let's say we use the word confidence or self-esteem or whatever it is. Like, for example, if you go ask a Buddhist about self-esteem, they don't even know what that means because like culturally, they don't have that concept, right? So a lot of these are, to me, constructed frameworks that you can go through and ask questions. You don't need to let them go or give up everything, but you just need to develop awareness that in moments that things seems very difficult, that things seems unsurmountable, that you see a path that is, you don't see an end to it probably from here, or you're trying to climb a mountain and all you can look at is the top of the mountain and how deep you are in the valley. Like as soon as you do that type of perspective of things, then you're just triggered all this conditioning that your subconscious will take over and make the choices for you. And then later on, you come up with justifications of why you made the choices and you think you'd made the choices. The real choice is when you're able to give meaning that you have to the events and circumstances of your life.
Like, so you kind of just blew my mind because I think some of the most meaningful conversations that I've ever had with people are the type of conversations that give me new language to explain my experience. And I've told sort of my story on here a bunch of different times, but I got to this place in sort of my corporate life where I was like, the only thing I can do is stuff outside my comfort zone. I can't be in here anymore because I don't think I had the words to say that, but exactly what you were describing. I wasn't making choices. I was bouncing around inside someone else's sort of paradigm and hoping to get to mine, right? Or what I was sort of led to. And there was hints along the way. Sometimes I would think to myself, wow, I thought I was on like this path, or, I worked this, it worked out, but how come I ended up here when I sort of meant to end up over there? And it was because I wasn't making choices. Wasn't. So what I sort of heard you say, and this is definitely an oversimplification, but I think is what the new language that I got from what you said is that you're really making choices when you're uncomfortable, when you're getting that feeling that comes from your subconscious. It's like, hey, this could be a threat to our survival. Let's rethink this. Let's pump the brakes. Let's go. So wow, that's a new way for me to think about things.
I don't know, like a new way or not, like just from, and I talk about this to people. Like whenever someone asks me a question similar to this, to me is like the most important thing you can do. This is like one of the biggest issue people don't know, and just we're all being fish in water. The language, English language, for example, or any other language you speak, it actually creates the framework around how you perceive reality or perceive your world. Sometimes people are uncomfortable when I use the word reality because they think there's one. And one thing like I try to remember is your language is just simplification of bunch of symbols and patterns to be able to communicate with other people. Right. And more nuanced you become with your language, more you get out of life because you could ask better questions. And I say this in one of the chapters in the book that I talk about how questioning can unlock a different level of you. Is the quality of your life is completely dependent on the quality of questions you're asking. And to be able to ask the right question, you need to understand you've been so conditioned through this history of you that you're continuously in these loops of patterns that you think that's what reality is. And from my perspective, every person sees the reality they choose to see. Either that choice is made by them or by the conditioning that have brought them to where they are now. A lot of times you hear in the corporate world, like as you've been in, it's like, okay, I had my ladder against the wrong wall, or I'm on like this treadmill. And this is funny. I just had a conversation with my brother. So I was talking to him about like an opportunity came to me to work at like BGC somewhere for a very sophisticated group. And then my brother told me, it's funny because this is another one of those choices that you don't realize you're just switching your treadmill for like a better looking treadmill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was like, see, even I write about this, I talk about this, but like we all need to realize that all of these conditioning, as much as you try to decondition or just like be aware of them, like if you're not aware of it, none of it matters because you keep falling back into the pattern, right? So the only time that things work is when you have your awareness, and that's when you're less and less are absorbed with what other people tell you to be the metric of success for you, and you have never had the opportunity or the choice to define it for yourself.
Yeah. I love what you said about language there. I always say, because I'm a coach, and when I'm working with people, I always remind them, I'm like, we can get trapped inside our words. Our words are just pointing to something. It's not the actual thing coming out of my mouth, right? We're pointing to something, and it means something different to you than it does to me. There's such a lived in experience in the way that you explain it. How did you come to this sort of way of thinking, this sort of, is it kind of do you read different types of texts? Like I can hear a little bit of some yogic teachings in it a little bit. I hear you definitely talking about like neurobiology and biology itself. There's a little bit of psychology in there. I mean, how did you come to this sort of this way of thinking?
I would say number one, like this is funny. Like I do think like every human being is like a fingerprint. You're very unique. You have as much as you think maybe somebody else is better or it's not, like there is a reason for you to be here, and you have to find out what that uniqueness is, because fulfillment comes from when you figure out how to make the choice and contribute your essence that is unique to the fabric of your existence. And to do that, you need to, I would say the best way I can talk about is triangulation. If you're one dimensional, only like, I don't know, let's say I'm into business. I just read business, marketing books, sales book, all of this stuff. And sure, they dabble in different things. So, okay, now you have one direction. So you have one point, one dot in the big scheme of the surface you're trying to navigate. And more dots you collect, more dots you have, and more curious you are as far as how these dots connect to each other, then you're going to be able to have a better triangulation and be able to navigate things a little differently. Because, for example, if you just look at things from like behavioral psychology, or just look at them from cognitive science, or look at them from just pure philosophy, and then we could break that out into Western philosophy versus Eastern philosophy. And or I just want to be religious, whatever religion it is, which is fundamentally another way of having a philosophy. So if you just choose one way and you think, again, fall into a comfort level, more than likely you inherit it on the way, wherever you are, and you just see the world from this one dimension, or maybe two, then you're missing out on understanding who you are not. And more dots you collect. And I talk about this is like how to unleash your creativity. And it's just like you need to be absolutely curious. Like can you just open your palm and look at it for 5 minutes? I promise you 99 out of 100 people will stop after 30 seconds unless I force them to do it. Like, can you appreciate how why are these lines? Why are there? What do they do? Like, just like deep curiosity, and that deep curiosity leads you to collect one point. And then you see something else and you continuously have this, I don't know, like, let's say hunger for like, I just need to know more, which I call it like, this approach is like art of mastery, which a lot of people think mastery is like getting to some end point and then like you just shoot great ideas out of your mouth and ears, which is, I don't think that's how mastery is. It's more like you could become a master in the moment by just your approach, which is how can I look at something or someone as that I have hundreds of interaction with as just brand new. Like this is my first time I'm seeing it or I'm seeing this issue and just look at things anew every time, like fundamentals, just every time, like do the thing. And you have to have a focus on, let's call it the process rather than the results. This is like fundamentally, like I hear everyone talks about this, like you need to be focused on the process, not results. But like in reality, there's no one has given a practical stuff. Why are we doing like, sure, I say it, but when it gets to it, first thing I'm thinking is about the results, right?
Yeah.
Because fundamentally what it does, as soon as you focus yourself on the results, then you're not here anymore. You know, the part that I said, like focus on that step in front of you. As soon as you become result oriented, you will lose the full essence of what this step is. And all you see is what your mind can think in a direct causal format because of your language of, I need to take this step to get to point B, right? Because think of it in English, right? And these are all connected subject, as you said. Like I'm just like very curious person, and I like to read variety of different topics. Obviously, I'm like close to my heart topics like philosophy, cognitive science, behavioral science, and just like continuously talking to people who they're just different type of human beings than me, or
Yeah.
they just do things differently and they have had immense level of, from their perspective, success or whatever it is. And what I've seen is as soon as you get caught up with what I can get out of this, you're not here, you're not in flow, you're not going to see the full scope of what's there because your language, which is a construct of your understanding of reality, forces you. Let's say for an English speaker, we have object, subject, and verb, and you think in these direct result oriented patterns. So you need, like, for example, like simple example is for the concept of love to exist for someone who speaks English, you need the lover and you need the beloved and the action in between, which is reconstruct as love, right? So like when someone from a different language says, why don't you be love? Like for an English speaker, it makes zero sense because you're like, I need this causal chain to happen. You don't realize when you're doing things and you're trying to create something, you're trapped in that causal chain in your subconscious as part of your conditioning. So all you can see is what I have seen in patterns in the past from other people who have done it, which is like the biggest thing now. Like go talk to the person who has done what you're trying to do and just copy their methodology, which is like, to me, is like, sure, that could work to a certain degree, but at a certain point, it doesn't work. So it's more of looking at the fact that a lot of times things happen in ways that's so unexpected and so outside of your realms of possibility of your thoughts. And if you're not here right now, looking at the full scope and your mind even 10% is on the result where you want to go, you will not see the 70 different doors that are around you. And you keep focusing on jiggling your key in that one door that somebody else opened.
Yeah.
So because you keep thinking to get from point A to C, I need to go through B. And that's exactly what we talked about earlier. You're trying to keep going through the known patterns. And that's just because your subconscious is telling you that's like the safe way to do it. Who says, for example, maybe getting to point C, you don't even need to go to point B. It could directly happen. But in your mind, because you're thinking through language structure of need causally to cause this, you lose the fact that there's so many more variable involved and so many different ways that this can go, that you could go from probably A to E instead of C without even going through any of the steps.
You know, you talked about this before we started rolling, and you mentioned it a couple of times in here, but you talked about flow. And I wonder, because I hear what you're describing, you know, in my journey sort of on that led me to doing this podcast and coaching and the things that I do now and self-development, personal development, started with a group called the Flow Research Collective. And I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but I just wonder, what is your definition of flow?
My definition of flow is living life just as it is, just 2 inches above ground. And I can describe it, you're so immersed in whatever you're doing because you're just so curious how this thing is going to work. Lose your consciousness is just like becomes super immersive and nothing else matters. So just everything dissolves in the back. And we call it a state of flow, and there's a bunch of research on state of flow, but it's like there's more ways of like people talking about it than be able to actually put you in one. And one thing is like everyone who I know who tap into it on demand, there's like a certain, I would say, understanding that I've developed about themselves. And it's not like sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, whatever it is, but like it's just everything is the same. Nothing changes. The only thing that changes is you're not hung up. In this state, you just let go of all your hangups because there's nothing. It doesn't matter if it goes well because Mr. Smith gonna pat you on the back and you're gonna get a promotion. It's not gonna be about, oh, I'm gonna be so great at what I'm doing. Someone's gonna come and appreciate me and I'm just gonna absorb that's like outside validation to make me feel better. You're doing the thing for the thing itself. There's no other things. You're not like, let's say I'm drafting, right? I'm drafting like I don't know, 100-page document. And if what I found out works for me, it doesn't matter what your profession is. For us to be fulfilled, you need to develop mastery in something. And when I go back to earlier that I said, like, I would say the reason you're here is first to find out who you are not, because that's the only thing you can do. You can never find out who you are because it's like chewing your own teeth with its own teeth, chewing the teeth, or like Alan Watts says, touching the tip of your finger with the tip of your finger. So you will never find out who you are, but what you can find out is who you're not. And that's like, what are those conditions that you have collected? And more you become aware, you let that go in that moment and something is coming up and you need to be there, right? So you could tap into your sense of uniqueness and bring that to the fabric of existence for you. And to do that at a high level, you need to have mastery. It's like, and for that, maybe it doesn't make sense to a lot of people when I say this, but the way that it makes sense to me is like, whatever you're doing, treat it as like fine art. Like treat yourself. It doesn't matter. You could be a janitor. You could be a lawyer like me. Treat it like art. Like don't downgrade what you're doing as, oh, this is just my job. Because as soon as something is a job, the treatment of it is different. It means it's just not fun enough for someone has to pay you to do it. And then you take that money and you go have fun, let's say over the weekend. And then you're in this cycle, right? Versus someone who comes to the table and the same thing. It's just like, it's your art. You got to make the best art just for the sake of the art, not for the sake of anything else that they're going to give you some money or whatever. And when you do that, everything, like for me, let's say I'm on a document, it's like super complicated and I treat it like a puzzle. Maybe I put in 40 hours, but I don't stop until internally I feel like I just put everything on the table on this one. And I have that sense of pride inside that treat yourself as an artist. I just created something that I'm proud of. because this is the best of I could do. And you could do that in any position you're in. Like people are like, I hear constantly like people, especially for the last few years, like, I don't know, they're in a corporate job. The next thing is like, no, I need to go start my own business because again, you're trying to get somebody else's success metrics and now chasing it because the one you chose before that somebody gave it to you is not working for you. So any position you're in life, you're a janitor, you're the greatest banker ever lived, you're the best life coach, or that's just something you do. If today, right now, you treat it as this is my art and I'm going to do it to become a master, no matter how long it takes, and I'm just doing it because I'm just so curious how well can this be done, then you automatically will be in a state of flow when you do it because you're just doing it for doing it. And it doesn't matter like how long it takes. And you hear people who go into the state of flow is like always like time disappears. And then the whole idea is like, you're just conditioned to think time is a specific way, right? So the only thing that is happening is you're just for the first time, you're here. And now you're here. You're like not thinking about, I don't know, like if I'm going to get an accolade for this, if I'm going to get paid for this, if you let all of that go in that moment, which is not easy to do. You just
Yeah.
have to develop the awareness to do it. Even when I'm saying this, there are a lot of moments that I have to remind myself. And you just follow that immersive experience. And the reason you go there is because in that moment, there's a lot of fundamental framework that you let go of. Time, your language, and your social norms that you have picked up that things should be done for a result. Time has to be like, we need to do so many tasks in a specific timeline. We need to like do this for efficiency rather than we do this with curiosity to see what's the next iteration is. So state of flow to me is when you let go of the most fundamental conditioning structures in your mental architecture and somehow in that moment you let them go. For a lot of people, for many people, they experience it a lot of times. They don't know what it is. It's just, oh, just working for whatever. And it was just working so well. I felt great about the work product or whatever it is I was doing, but they don't know why or how. I would say in essence, you just let go of your hang-ups that you have collected for a long time for whatever reason that sequence of events led you to do it. And it's repeatable. It's just a matter of same as anything else. I don't say you need to train for it or whatever, but what you need to do is you need to first realize who you're not.
Yeah.
And more you develop that awareness, more and more when you try to do things and then first thing comes to your mind is like, am I going to get this result? And you're like, oh, one of those little nuance thoughts that I have, maybe I just let this one go for now. Then the next thing comes is like, what if I'm doing it a new way? What if people are going to doubt me or tell me I'm not going to get it? And then you're like, okay, I'm triggered to think I'm going to lose being part of the in group because I'm not doing it similar to other people. So I'm just let that go too. And like, these are little things you become aware of. And as more you become aware of, more and more you're able to realize like the thing that is in your way to find your true edge is you. And for me is Alex, for you is Ryan, but we need to go beyond that. Like Ryan and Alex are just a collection of memories developed into this recognizable pattern from outside because they have told us that's what develops value long term. It's okay to have that. And that's a mask we all sometimes have to wear, but just be aware that it's just a mask and don't confuse it with who you are. And as soon as you have that realization, you can let go of things that seem fundamental to you very easily because you realize it was just a bunch of opinions from other people. Now, what I call it is like, you have your choices. Your life is like, let's say 1,000 blank pages. Either you choose to pick up the pen and write it every day with all the doubt, with all the fear, or there are millions of people out there super happy to pick up the pen for you and write it down for you. And then you could follow it, which is you just fundamentally don't want to make the choice because making the choice is very scary for a lot of people. And then you realize when you make those choices like one after another, you realize everything is possible for you and beyond what you thought is possible. because you took the step to put your actions where it matters when everybody else didn't want to do it because they would be judged from outside or whatever reason you have. And fundamentally, this goes back to your question of like, you could call it confidence or you could call it self-esteem or whatever you want to call it. But essentially is I'm not worried about what someone I don't know or even know think about my choices because I'm making conscious choices. And just because, let's say, 2 million people agreed the right choice is X, just realize that's just a 2 million people opinion. And if 2 million people agreed on something, it doesn't make it any more of a fact than an opinion. First, we have to find out who we are not to be able to see we are not really making choices. And it's our subconscious patterns developed through conditioning and history that are making choices for us. And then we continuously wonder, why is my ladder against the wrong?